Listen to me very carefully. What happened just changed the legal landscape of America, and most people have absolutely no idea what they're looking at. While millions of Americans were busy scrolling social media, arguing about nonsense, and wasting time on distractions that won't make their lives better, a Supreme Court decision sent shockwaves through the entire country. Not a small ripple, not a minor adjustment, a legal earthquake. A 7-2 ruling is not the kind of decision that quietly disappears into the background. This is the kind of ruling that forces governors, lawmakers, attorneys, activists, and ordinary citizens to stop what they're doing and pay attention. Whether you agree with it or not doesn't matter. I don't care about your feelings. I care about reality. And reality doesn't ask for permission before it changes your life. The people who understand what happened first will always have an advantage over the people who wait until the consequences hit them in the face. That's how business works. That's how investing works. That's how life works. Winners see the trend before it arrives. Losers notice it after the damage is already done. Today, we're going to break down exactly why this 7-2 Supreme Court decision is causing panic in some circles, celebration in others, and confusion almost everywhere else. More importantly, we're going to talk about what it means for the future. Because the story isn't about what happened yesterday. The story is about what's coming next. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button right now. This information is worth thousands of dollars because understanding major legal and political shifts before everyone else gives you an advantage that most people never get. The mainstream media will spend weeks arguing about headlines while missing the bigger picture. Here, we focus on consequences. We focus on outcomes. We focus on what actually matters. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join people who would rather understand reality than be surprised by it. Now let's get into the cold, hard truth. Most people hear the phrase 7-2 Supreme Court ruling and think it's just another court decision. That's because most people don't understand how power actually works. The numbers matter. The numbers always matter. The numbers don't lie. A narrow Supreme Court decision often leaves room for interpretation. A close vote suggests deep disagreement among the justices. But when you see a 7-2 decision, you're looking at something very different. You're looking at a ruling that sends a message. It signals that the legal reasoning behind the decision persuaded not just a simple majority, but an overwhelming majority of the court. Think about that for a moment. 7 justices agreed. 7. In a country where people can't agree on the weather, 7 Supreme Court justices found enough common ground to support the same conclusion. That alone tells you this is not a ruling that lower courts can casually ignore. And that's where the real story begins. When the Supreme Court speaks with that kind of authority, lower courts across the country start paying attention immediately. Judges know that future cases will be evaluated through the lens of this new precedent. Attorneys know their legal strategies may need to change. State governments know that laws previously considered secure may suddenly become vulnerable to challenge. This is why legal analysts often refer to major Supreme Court rulings as shockwaves. The original decision is only the beginning. The real impact comes from what happens afterward. Every lawsuit filed in the future, every challenge brought before a court, every argument made by attorneys trying to expand or limit the ruling's reach. That's where the battle moves next. The average citizen sees a headline, the legal system sees a roadmap, and the people who understand that distinction are always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. That's the first lesson you need to understand. The Supreme Court didn't just decide one case. It potentially changed the framework through which countless future cases will be analyzed. That's why lawyers are studying every word. That's why lawmakers are reviewing existing policies. That's why advocacy groups on every side are preparing their next move. The winners are already adapting. The losers are still arguing about what happened. Now let's talk about why state governments across the country are suddenly under pressure. Listen to me very carefully. When a major Supreme Court ruling establishes a new constitutional standard or reinforces an existing one, state lawmakers face a simple reality. They can either adapt to the new legal environment or they can spend years losing expensive court battles. The market has rules, business has rules, the Constitution has rules. Successful people understand the rules and position themselves accordingly. Unsuccessful people spend their time complaining about rules they can't change. Many state governments have spent decades building regulatory frameworks based on interpretations that seem secure at the time. Legislatures passed laws, agencies created procedures, courts issued decisions. Entire systems developed around assumptions about how constitutional rights would be interpreted. Then one major Supreme Court ruling arrives, and suddenly those assumptions are being questioned. That's why legal departments in state governments don't treat these rulings as political talking points. They treat them as potential threats to existing policies. Every attorney working for a state government understands that a significant Supreme Court ruling can become the foundation for future lawsuits. The question isn't whether challenges will be filed. The question is how many. And that's where uncertainty enters the picture. Imagine spending years building a regulatory structure only to discover that portions of it may now face constitutional scrutiny. Imagine being a lawmaker who voted for legislation years ago and suddenly finding that attorneys across the country are preparing arguments against it. Imagine being responsible for defending policies that may no longer enjoy the same legal protection they once did. That is the reality many officials face after a major ruling. This is why legal reviews begin immediately. Government attorneys start examining statutes. Advocacy groups begin identifying potential targets for litigation. Policy experts start discussing possible revisions. Everyone understands that precedent matters. Everyone understands that future courts will look to the Supreme Court for guidance. The average person sees a headline and moves on with their day. The professionals understand that the headline is only the opening bell. Stop being a victim of ignorance. Start paying attention to how power operates. The people making decisions at the highest levels are not waiting around for cable news to explain things. They're reading opinions. They're analyzing language. They're preparing strategies, because strategy beats emotion every single time. Now let's talk about the winners and losers. I know some people don't like that language. Too bad. Reality doesn't care what language makes you comfortable. There are always winners and losers whenever major institutional changes occur, not because one side is morally superior, not because one side is smarter, because one side adapts faster. The first winners are always the people who understand the new environment before everyone else. That's true in investing, that's true in politics, that's true in law. When a Supreme Court decision changes the legal landscape, individuals and organizations that can effectively use the new precedent gain leverage. They gain opportunities, they gain momentum, they understand where the trend is heading before the crowd catches up. Meanwhile, other groups may find themselves defending positions that suddenly become harder to justify under the new framework. That's not emotion, that's mathematics. The numbers don't lie. Every major legal decision redistributes influence. Some arguments become stronger, some arguments become weaker. Some strategies become more effective, others become less effective. That's how systems work. The biggest mistake people make is assuming that today's environment will remain unchanged forever. It never does. Markets evolve, technologies evolve, laws evolve, institutions evolve, and the people who refuse to acknowledge change usually pay the highest price. You're broke because you think stability is permanent. You're vulnerable because you assume yesterday's assumptions will protect you tomorrow. They won't. The individuals who benefit most from major changes are usually the ones who remain flexible. They study developments, they monitor trends, they prepare for different outcomes. They understand that success belongs to those who adapt faster than their competitors. The losers take a different approach. They complain, they deny, they pretend reality isn't changing, then they act surprised when consequences arrive. Listen to me very carefully. It does not matter whether you're discussing investing, business, politics, or constitutional law. The principle remains exactly the same. Those who recognize change early gain advantages. Those who resist reality fall behind. The Supreme Court's ruling has already happened. The debate over whether people like it is secondary. The important question is who understands the consequences first. Now let's move to the next battlefield, the courts. Because if you think this ruling ends the story, you're not paying attention. This ruling is not the finish line. It's the starting gun. Whenever the Supreme Court issues a major decision, lower courts immediately begin the process of applying that decision to future cases. Attorneys across the country start examining how far the reasoning can extend. Advocacy organizations start identifying opportunities. Opponents start searching for ways to limit the ruling's impact. This is where legal warfare begins. And make no mistake about it, legal warfare is exactly what follows major constitutional decisions. Cases will be filed, arguments will be made, appeals will be submitted, judges will interpret language, new precedents will emerge. This process can take years. That's another reason most people misunderstand these moments. They think a Supreme Court decision produces instant results. Sometimes it does. More often, it initiates a chain reaction. One lawsuit leads to another. One ruling influences the next. One interpretation expands into broader applications. That's how precedent grows. It's like compound interest. A single dollar invested today becomes something larger tomorrow. A single legal precedent established today can influence dozens of future cases, then hundreds, then thousands. That's why attorneys obsess over wording. Every sentence matters, every phrase matters, every legal principle matters. Future litigants will examine every paragraph looking for advantages. Future judges will reference the opinion when issuing decisions. Future lawmakers will consider its implications when drafting legislation. And the ripple effect can be enormous. And here's what most people fail to understand. The Supreme Court doesn't have to revisit every issue directly for its influence to spread. Lower courts do much of that work. They apply existing precedent to new circumstances. They determine how legal principles fit evolving situations. That's where some of the most important battles will occur. Not in front of television cameras, not in campaign speeches, inside courtrooms, inside legal briefs, inside judicial opinions. That is where the future will be shaped. The smart observer understands this immediately. The average observer notices years later. Which one are you going to be? Because right now, while most people are distracted by noise, legal professionals are already preparing for the next phase. And the next phase may be even more significant than the ruling itself. Now let's zoom out and talk about the bigger picture, because this is where most people completely miss what's happening. Listen to me very carefully. Major Supreme Court decisions are rarely just about the specific issue in front of the court. They often become part of a much larger story about constitutional interpretation, government authority, individual rights, and the balance of power in America. That is why this ruling matters. Not because of the headlines, not because of the social media arguments, not because politicians are going to spend the next 6 months trying to score points with their supporters. It matters because Supreme Court decisions influence the direction of the country for years, sometimes decades. Think about how power actually works. Most people think elections determine everything. They don't. Elections matter. Legislation matters. But legal precedent matters too. A lot, and because precedent becomes the framework through which future disputes are resolved. Future lawmakers pay attention to precedent. Future governors pay attention to precedents. Future attorneys pay attention to precedent. Future judges pay attention to precedent. The ripple effects can extend far beyond the original case. That's why sophisticated observers never focus exclusively on the immediate outcome. They focus on trajectories. They focus on trends. They focus on where the legal reasoning could lead next, because that's where advantages are created. In business, the biggest fortunes are often made by people who recognize trends before they become obvious. In law and politics, the same principle applies. The crowd reacts. Leaders anticipate. The crowd argues. Strategists prepare. The crowd gets emotional. Professionals get to work. I don't care about your feelings. I care about your ability to understand reality before reality forces itself upon you. And reality is telling us something important. The legal environment in America continues to evolve. Constitutional debates are not disappearing. Court battles are not disappearing. Political disagreements are not disappearing. If anything, these conflicts are becoming more significant because the stakes continue to rise. Every major ruling becomes part of a larger conversation about where the country is headed. Every major ruling influences future legal arguments. Every major ruling creates new opportunities for some groups and new challenges for others. That is simply how systems operate. The smartest people understand that no major institution exists in isolation. The courts influence politics. Politics influences legislation. Legislation influences citizens. Citizens influence future elections. Everything connects, which means this ruling is not merely about today's headlines. It is about tomorrow's legal battles, tomorrow's legislation, tomorrow's court decisions, tomorrow's political debates, and tomorrow always arrives faster than people expect. That's why informed citizens pay attention, not because they enjoy controversy, because they understand consequences. The average person consumes information. The exceptional person studies implications. Those are not the same thing. One creates awareness, the other creates advantage. An advantage is what separates winners from losers. Now, let's finish with a challenge. Listen to me very carefully. You have a decision to make. Not about this ruling, not about politics, not about which side you support. You have a decision to make about how you approach reality itself. Are you going to be the person who waits for events to happen and then complains about the consequences? Or are you going to be the person who pays attention, studies developments, understands trends, and prepares before everyone else? Because that's the difference between winners and losers. Winners don't get special treatment. Winners don't possess magical abilities. Winners simply recognize reality faster than the crowd. Losers spend their time arguing with reality, and reality wins every single time. The Supreme Court has spoken. The legal system is already responding. Lawmakers are evaluating options. Attorneys are preparing strategies. Advocacy groups are planning their next moves. The game is moving forward, whether people are paying attention or not. The question is whether you're moving forward with it. Stop being a victim of ignorance. Stop waiting for someone else to explain the world to you. Start paying attention to the forces shaping the future, because the people who understand change first usually benefit from it. The people who ignore change usually become casualties of it. So here's my challenge. Go into the comments right now and tell me what you think the biggest consequence of this ruling will be over the next 5 years. Not next week, not tomorrow, 5 years. Think strategically, think long term, think like someone who wants to understand where the country is going rather than where it has been. And if you got value from this video, subscribe right now. Because while everyone else is reacting to headlines, we're focused on consequences. While everyone else is chasing emotions, we're chasing facts. And while everyone else is waiting for the future to arrive, we're preparing for it. The numbers don't lie. Reality doesn't negotiate. And the people who understand that first are usually the people who win.